So if I could ask everyone to please take their seats.
Hey, what's going on today? Good. The crowds, they don't love us anymore.
So we've gone from standing room only to where there's lots of seats. I don't know if that's good or bad, but we shall soon see. And Michael Regan will be joining us shortly, so we will then have a quorum and will officially open the meeting. But I just wanted to give a few opening remarks, and then we'll turn to the Department of Corrections for updates on a number of issues. And then once Michael Regan's here, there'll be approval of the minutes and the election of the vice chair. So first, let me have my colleagues introduce themselves.
Jennifer Jones-Alston.
Derek Cephas.
Bobby Cohen, good morning.
Thank you. So one of the things is that, as people know, that when there were variance requests from the Department of Corrections or DOH-MH, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, that those requests were every 2 months when we were meeting 6 times a year. At our last board meeting, there was an amendment to the bylaws that we would be meeting 9 times a year rather than 6 times a year. So as a result, we will be taking up any variances every other meeting. So the variances that were approved at the last meeting will carry forward until our meeting in early March, which I believe is March 10th. So just wanted to put people on notice on that front. And I'm really pleased to see at our last board meeting indicated that Amanda Masters was leaving, and she has assumed a new position as a Deputy General Counsel for the Public Advocate. And we're very fortunate in the interim to have Richard Wolf working with us. And for those of you who don't know Richard Wolf, he was the director of the New York City Board of Corrections for close to 30 years, a correctional expert in his own right, and both the staff and board are really pleased to have him working with us on the this interim basis. The other piece is that we are in the process of, as the board knows, in terms of identifying an executive director. If you go to the New York City Board of Correction website, the job description is posted. The individual that we're working with, who is Mary King, her contact information is on the last page. So we really are looking far and wide to get the best candidate to lead us forward, particularly in this period in terms of where we've adopted a comprehensive set of rules and now to work closely with both departments and really focus on minimum standards and a number of other issues. So if you're interested or if you know potential candidates, the sooner you let us know, the better. And there's a search committee which consists of Brian Hamill, Michael Regan, Steve Safier, and myself. There are 2 issues that the department is going to be addressing when we have Department of Correction updates, and one has to do with there was a flooding in AMKC Quad 16, the lower unit, caused by a clogged sewage line, and it's our understanding that correctional officials required inmates to mop and clean up raw sewage and human waste without providing the inmates with appropriate protective gear. The staff, Board of Corrections staff, actually did an investigation. So we've asked the department to address that. And then in addition, there was an article on February 9th, which was yesterday, that a third of Rikers Island's guards missed work during snowstorm, forcing inmates to stay locked in cells, and pointed out that this is an ongoing challenge. So we've asked the department and the commissioner to address that issue as well. The other thing is, yesterday we received a letter from Sarah Kerr, who's the director of the Legal Aid Society, the Prison Rights Project, and it's very helpful. It's consistent with what we're doing in terms of outlining what we need to be doing, the board, in terms of a monitoring perspective and reporting perspective going forward. So on behalf of the board and staff, I really want to thank Legal Aid and the Prison Rights Project, because it really supports the work that we have and will continue to do. So with that, in terms of opening remarks, we'll come back to minutes and the election of vice chair. The first, and I'm going to turn to Commissioner Pond and his staff. The first is the enhanced supervision housing, that it was published, the notice of our rules was published on January 21st. So the new rules take effect 30 days later, which is February 21st. And so therefore, the department is authorized to open ESH on the 21st or thereafter, and all the other rules having to do with owed time, and many of them take effect at that same time. We're going to be requesting pre-opening information from the department and we'll be looking at operations orders, directives, and interdepartmental memos, and the board is committed to working closely with the department on this effort. So with that, I'd like to turn to the Commissioner to get an update on ESH and other efforts as it relates to the recent rules that were adopted. Commissioner Pont?
So we have Deputy Warden Kelly here, who we selected to be in charge of the ESH operation, bringing that on board. He can give us kind of a more in-depth briefing on what's been done so far. I think the physical plant, the unit that first unit we're going to open is on task. It's all the mechanical pieces are done, the cameras are in place, the policies have been written, staff have been selected, they've been trained. So I think as it pertains to ESH, we're in very good shape to open on time with a limited number. We'll start with a very small population to make sure that it functionally works as we believe it should, and then build up for that. So if you have Mr. Kelly come up and kind of give you a little more in depth on ESH.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Deputy Warden Robert Kelly III. I've been tasked with overseeing the enhanced supervision housing unit. To date, in terms of the physical plant and construction and renovation, all has been completed. All maintenance issues have been addressed and abated in terms of showers, lighting, electrical, cell doors, vents, electrical outlets for all safety security measures. All that has been completed. As the Commissioner said, we have identified staff. To staff the unit, we have one unit manager and a rank of 8 assistant deputy warden, 4 captains and 26 correction officers. All have been trained with the additional 40 hours that were mandated by the board rules. This training will consist of safe crisis management, which deals with de-escalation, IPC. This is a three-day block training with the Correctional Academy, approximately 24 hours. We also have a basic crisis management with the Athletes Association, with deals with mental health. This additional 8 hours. We also have specialized training with the Emergency Service Unit within the department, which was deal with all security issues in terms of escorting, cell extraction, MK9, those sort of things. That runs for 1 week, which is a total of additional 40 hours of security practices.
Can I just ask a question on the training? So what percentage of the officers will actually have been trained when the first ESH unit opens?
All of them? Okay. Yeah, everyone that will be assigned to the unit will be trained.
Can you describe the process that you use to decide which of the officers would be assigned to the EHU? Were they people who applied for it, or they were selected? How was that done?
Yes, some of we have volunteers that we're looking forward to the direction that the department is going. There were some that are also within the facility that are non-probationary, up to date with already refresher courses such as CPR, first aid, use of force training. There are those that have also been selected that through a vetting process did not have any use of force charges or any MOC, anything disciplinary pending. So it was a detailed selection process through the facility as well as myself to vet the officers and staff that we identified.
I visited the unit that's going to open first, I guess, last week, and I noticed that there were 4 cells which were designed as suicide watchable cells. Do you intend to keep people on suicide watch in the ESH?
Yes, we're working with Commissioner Brown's office in terms of anyone that maybe manipulative gestures or such that the OMH feels that we could keep on watching that unit.
Okay, and that's been policy. You've worked with DOH-MH on that one?
We're working with the best.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
In terms of the technology, televisions, the cameras, all those things are up in the actual unit. We have a unique feature that we brought to the housing unit where all the televisions are built in with a transmitter. So this way the inmates on their headphones, there's a frequency for each television to be able to listen to their headsets. We try to bring the noise level down for inmates that as well as staff for better communication and just overall, psyche to the unit. All the mandated services and programs will be afforded within the unit or, very close thereof. So this way we do not have to escort them around. Everything will come to them. Services, recreation, law library, other services that, programs in terms of idleness reduction that will be afforded. All of these things will be afforded in the house. We've made different renovation accommodations or different multi-purpose rooms to, even hold congregate services, whereas it won't affect the rest of the inmate population within the housing area. It can be more of a private setting for whatever chaplain or rabbi wants to conduct the services. So all those things, we took into account to bring it to within the housing area. In terms of security, we constructed a 3-point search area. So all the inmates that will go within and out of the housing area will undergo a 3-point search, with a strip search, a boss chair, walk-through manometer that will be closely supervised with the staff and the supervisors to ensure safety and security for not only the inmates but the staff population. So to date, as the commissioner said, we are scheduled to open for February 22nd. We'll start with a small population of total 20, so it's going to be 10 inmates per tier. So this way the staff and the inmates alike can get according, come along with the actual unit. So that way if there's any kinks or anything that needs to be ironed out, we have a smaller inmate population that we can handle, as well as, getting staff adjusted to the correct way and the overall mission, which is to reduce the violence and, and still create morale within the unit.
Those 20 that you identified, where are they currently housed?
They're housed throughout the department.
Throughout the
Yes,
facility?
throughout the department.
Are they in general population?
Yes, there'll be some in general population, some will be released out of the period of segregation once the reform takes place. Those different areas that we have been identifying, it's an ongoing process. Inmates that we have selected, for today, they're, cases by case, day by day. We're always evaluating, we're always identifying new inmates. We have a basic inmate selection committee that meets weekly, that we overview every inmate's specific case. So this way, if there's anything that changes or anything that comes about, we're not too far.
Right, but I'm focusing on the 20 that you've currently identified, where they are housed. That was my question.
Okay, yes, they're housed throughout the department.
Including general population.
Including general population, yes, sir.
So the selection process would be just names that will be submitted to a hearing officer to have a hearing on. So it won't be just picking people up and putting them in.
Will they have a designation? Like you have designations Department Red ID, you have designations with Max, is there a designation that someone gets in your system when they are ESH approved or eligible?
Some will cover in totality. There's no specific.
There's no name for it.
No specific.
And I have a question. If there's a fight between two prisoners in ESH, is there a policy regarding locking down the unit after the fight?
In terms of the actual facility, the safety and security,
Talking about the unit and or the facility.
As the supervisor and the unit manager and talk man deems fit, an emergency situation would be in practice as
Yeah, so typically we would lock down to figure out what went on, to make sure everyone else is safe. Sometimes a fight between two individuals may be bigger, it may be a gang issue, so we would typically lock down and get a good sense on what's happening before we open back up. Obviously treat people that were involved, but looking at what else might be going on. And that'd be general practice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? Because the other thing that we built into our rules are steady posts. What's the sense that you're going to be able to maintain a steady post as much as possible?
Yeah, we're definitely working with that. We have the staffing levels, so that way everyone will have a consistent post and be steady staff assigned to the area.
Yeah, so the short commander, which is a unit manager, has been selected, the captains are steady, and the officers are all been selected and trained. Some volunteered, many were selected, so that's why they're there, so they're assigned to that unit, and they will be steady.
Excellent. And we just been joined by Michael Regan. I want to thank him. And Michael, what I'd like to do is continue with the Department of Correction updates and then go back to the minutes and election of vice chair. Okay, the next issue, and I really want to give the department a lot of credit, is around the work with adolescents. The commissioner put together an advisory board of correction staff, along with board member Brian Hamill are part of it. It's both other city agencies, other interest groups and the like. So Commissioner, it'd be helpful to get an update in terms of where you all are in that front.
So we're still working on formalizing some of the policies. The TRUE unit, which is on 2 meetings ago, we talked about renaming that. Many felt that we should have a better terminology to describe what goes on. Right now it's the therapeutic repair unit, which some felt was we could do a better job in naming that. So we took the advisory board on a tour of RNDC in place of the last meeting. I believe, if I'm correct, and when that's here, when that's on this, we're going to take them on a tour of Crossroads, which is a juvenile facility here in the city. And so part of our processes is to educate the board as to other ways of doing business, to rather than for us to sit in a room and try to write a policy, to really try to show other agencies and what they do and how we can better adapt to those things. And in the juvenile systems, bring them back to New York City Corrections. So I think it's going pretty well. I don't know if Gwinnett wants to come up and give us a little more in detail on that, but the meetings have been good. We're getting good feedback from everybody that's participating.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So I just wanted to give you a quick update on the adolescent work group and the reform agenda. Right now, we are working very closely with our advisory board. Some of our newest members are the Jail Action Coalition, the Urban Justice Center, Legal Aid Society, Bronx Defenders. We have about, I would say, 25 individuals from internal and external stakeholders. Some of our priorities include the finalization of the transitional repair unit. As the Commissioner mentioned, we just completed a vote, which I will release the vote to the board members next Tuesday to determine what the new name of the unit will be. It looks like it's between the transitional reintegration unit or the transitional restoration unit. So we have two different names that are competing right now. In addition to what the Commissioner mentioned, is that we're working very closely to look at best practices across the country. We've scheduled calls with different jurisdictions to talk about some of their policy as it relates to alternatives to punitive SAG right now. The other priority is, or some of the things that are listed on our agenda for our upcoming meeting, is the finalization of some resources for parents who have children that are incarcerated. Today, as we speak, our advisory board is at Crossroads in Brooklyn, taking a look at their practices, just to help us figure out how we can modify some of their best practices to what is already being done in our custody.
Any questions?
Any questions? Something else that's pretty exciting that I'd like to share is that we're also exploring the use of blended learning. So we're looking at how we can utilize tablets, technology, to facilitate educational services and provide the youth with opportunity to gain more credits. So right now we're looking at different companies to talk to about how we could support the use of those tablets within on school sites and in housing areas.
Right. It's one, really, not you to ask me to, but on behalf of Councilperson Crowley, when are you moving the 16 and 17-year-olds off of Rikers Island?
So we haven't, that decision has not been made yet.
Let me answer that.
So.
So the issue is, the mayor is supportive of that move. I think, as everybody's aware, there's been a bill filed, or the government is in the process of filing a bill to raise the age. If that was to occur, then the custody of those 16 and 17-year-olds would be a different agency. So while we've had some sites that we looked at that would probably be suitable, the concept is, why go through that process if we're going to move it to another agency? So it's on hold to see what happens in the assembly with this bill that governs file.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So the idea would be that Administration for Children's Services, assuming legislation is adopted, would be taking the lead for 60
It
and
would be them
70.
finding the site and DOC would.
But it would be the
out.
same thing, it would be a custodial facility, it would,
Yes, it would, in custody facility, but it would be under the juvenile system.
and the Brooklyn House of Detention, is that something that you considered for this?
We've looked at that. Brooklyn and Queens are old-style jails. They're really, the program space is very limited, very little outside space. And, if you looked at a juvenile facility, you would never design anything like that. It's just the physical plant doesn't merit even consideration.
Okay.
We've taken a step backwards if we did.
And Commissioner, in terms of the thinking of the work regarding 18 to 21-year-olds, young adults, do you see creating a similar sort of advisory board to work with the department?
We're in the process of finalizing that. We're working on that as a second mission. A lot of the things we're learning on the 6 and 17-year-old will be part of that, but it's a different group. It presents different challenges for us. The physical plant issues, the cell block size, that are all challenges. We can, right now we've got 33-man cell blocks in RNDC with 15 kids in them. So we couldn't reproduce that for young adults because there's 1,200 of those. But we're in the process of setting that committee up.
So a lot of our advisory board members have expressed interest to stay on to help us develop what the young adult model will look like, but we also have taken efforts to actually create a subcommittee that would include the mayor's office, the Pinkerton Foundation, and the EKC, and we're looking at potential candidates for consultants to help us with finalizing what this model should look like.
Right. To be continued. Thanks. for
Yes.
that.
And the other thing I just want to remind that there's no adult system in the country that's even attempting this. So this is pretty unique. It's new grounds, and so we're really looking to establish best practice here in New York City on this model.
Right, which is also, as you know, Commissioner, why we built in the rules that it wasn't taking effect on the 21st, but rather on January 1st, and also funding is key as well. The next issue is the status of the Brooklyn House of Detention. There's been a report in the Daily News, I think other report, about paring back the number of inmates housed in the Brooklyn House of Detention. Some folks are saying it's because of overtime. Some said it's the beginning of closing it down. It'd be helpful to hear from you and the department in terms of what the plan is for the Brooklyn House of Detention.
So in general, we've never had any intention of closing Brooklyn down. It was due to a low intake of inmates, so the arrests were low in the city. And as we saw that continue to go through, typically our count drops in December, except the drops in December of 2014 were pretty substantial, and we'll start to recover in January with numbers. So the drop was much bigger than we've ever seen, and the recovery, meaning the increase, has been much slower. So Chief Murphy, who we'll talk in a minute, really said, look, let's downsize this because we can. It's one of our smaller facilities, and use those staff to fill in overtime spots in Brooklyn. So basically in court processes or other things that are going on in the city. We never intended to close it, but we wanted to at least give staff some relief in areas that had a lot of overtime.
So my sense is that this instance is both seasonality but also the police slowdown. So is the exacerbated or increased the diminished numbers.
Correct. So I'm not sure what caused the reduction in arrests. Go to Commissioner Grant.
External issues.
But Chief, can just give you a little briefing on Brooklyn and where we're at today. Counts has started coming down. So,
Chief,
Good morning.
good morning.
As the Commissioner said, the arrest numbers had decreased significantly in December of 2014. So in an effort to save money and increase our bed capacity or our utilization of beds, we consolidated beds at Brooklyn, backfilled those inmates with beds on Rikers Island, and the staff that were in Brooklyn that would have normally housed those units have been reallocated within Brooklyn itself, Brooklyn Courts and Brooklyn House, to alleviate overtime in those two particular areas.
Chief, the predecessors of yours
Yes.
and the commissioners have come here and said Brooklyn House is a really great place. Transportation, you said countless dollars not having to drive people from Rikers to the courts in Brooklyn, all kinds of really good things. It's a great place, it's a great facility.
That's correct.
Do you still feel the same way?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a 759 bed capacity, all single cells. So it's very conducive to put inmates in those particular areas from a security standpoint. So our high custody inmates that we feel need to be placed in that type of setting, Brooklyn House is ideal for it. The housing units are, unlike most units on Rikers Island, 50-bed units or 33-bed units. It's a linear tier setting with an upper and lower, 14 cells on each tier. It has its own day room, so everyone on the unit doesn't commingle. So you have 28 inmates on, it's an H-type setting. So you have A, B, C, and D. Those inmates in those 4 units don't commingle together. So it allows for separation within the housing floor. So it's optimal for the department to house inmates in.
I just want to clarify, as I understand it, what this is really a capacity management, capacity utilization
That's
issue,
correct.
but this is not a permanent paring down. You will continue to assess the numbers and make adjustments as is necessary.
That's correct. So approximately 2 weeks ago, we were at, maybe 3 weeks ago, our population was around 9,400, and it started to creep up, and now we're maintaining around 10,000. So we're in the 10,999 range. So at one point 2 weeks ago, we had to actually open up 28 beds in Brooklyn, to create new admission space on Rikers. So yeah, as the population fluctuates, we will add and redact inmates from Brooklyn.
It's important that when you have the capacity to create a safer environment by decreasing the population in units, that you have a plan to take advantage of that rather than being efficient in terms of closing the facility. So I just hope, looking forward, when you figure out how to, for example, end solitary confinement for those 21 and under, which you're going to do, which I assume you're going to do by creating smaller units with increased staff to improve the security for everybody there, that you're going to need more space to do that. And so crowding people in when you get open rather than decreasing the population of units is a strategy that I look forward to in the future.
In response to that, sure. So I don't believe we're crowding people in. The count was dramatically dropped. And inmate staff safety is a high priority for us, so it wasn't crowding people in, it was just utilizing space more efficiently. But we didn't overcrowd Rikers Island in order to achieve that, only because the count was 1,000 inmates below normal. But we agree with the count.
Thank you. And I appreciate your time.
And then the next issue, which I referenced and Commissioner referenced in my opening remarks, is the unsanitary conditions at AMKC Quad 16 lower.
Well, it gets a little bit of the, as everyone realizes, the physical plans in most of our jails are pretty old. Some of our facilities were probably in need of replacement many years ago. So the sewer, the infrastructure for Rikers Island is in pretty poor shape. So Ms. Feeney's here, and she'll talk about that issue specifically.
Good, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Patricia Feeney, the Assistant Commissioner for Environmental Health. On February 2nd, we received a complaint from the Legal Aid Society about unsanitary conditions in both 4 upper and 16 lower, and that there was no heat in the area. We confirmed that there was heat in the area. It was between 70 and 72 degrees. On February 3rd, my Deputy Executive Director, Monique Antoine, conducted an inspection of the occupied area, which was 4 upper. There were no sanitation violations in the facility at that time. However, the inmates had reported that when they were housed in the area, it was dirty and that they had to clean it. We received a second complaint on Thursday from the Legal Aid Society with findings from the Office of Compliance Consultants that alleged that the inmates had cleaned sewage without the proper personal protective equipment. I personally interviewed the inmates that were in the housing area who had done the cleaning, and although they had not received the coveralls that normally we would give them, they were given boots, they had latex gloves from the very beginning, 3 or 4 of them had goggles, and they were given the plastic gloves for the chemicals. That is not generally how we clean sewage backups. It's usually done under direct supervision of a trained correction officer, and the coveralls would have been provided at the very beginning. What we've done to ensure that this does not occur again is I sent a reminder memo out to each warden yesterday, and also instructed the wardens to have their tour commanders contact me personally every time we have a sewage backup, so that I can make sure that the appropriate protective equipment is available. And we do have written cleaning and sanitizing policies in every housing area, and we can train any additional staff that need to be trained in the facility.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I also want to thank Legal Aid Prison Rights Project for bringing the issue to the forefront. Thank you. The next issue, which I also referenced at the outset of the meeting, was the article yesterday in the Daily News, a third of Rikers Island's guards missed work during snowstorm, which is a concern both in terms of our lockout minimum standards, but it's also a concern from a safety perspective. So, Commissioner, if you could just address that issue.
I'll have the chief talk about the practice in the uniform branch. While we did experience some short-term lock-ins, I think all the facilities were returned to normal fairly quickly. Now we're in the middle of a major snowstorm, and even when staff did report to work, we had a number of people report to work late. There was transportation issues everywhere. So as we had the staff get in the door, we were able to open most of our facilities back up in fairly quick order. So part of the precaution was to make sure we had sufficient staff on hand before we opened, and that was kind of a moving process for us. But I'll have the chief talk about that.
Morning again. So on the day of the 26th and 27th, so the 26th we had approximately 419 members of service calling sick, and then on Tuesday the 27th I think it was about 780 members of service called out sick. So the lockdown that you referenced was something that I initiated. I spoke to the commissioner that Tuesday morning and told him that after going to roll calls at 7 a.m., some roll calls there was only 6 or 7 people at roll call, so I made the decision then to keep right now on lockdown, including the boroughs.
Do you have face-to-face replacement?
On most positions, yes. In the housing areas, it would be 1-for-1. Yes.
Michael, what's face-to-face
I mean, you
replacement?
can't leave unless your replacement comes.
Okay.
That's correct.
So it doesn't make sense to me. Do you understand my question?
Right. So
The midnight staffing, but
The midnight staffing is much smaller.
It's much smaller.
Okay.
So Monday into Tuesday, say if we needed, I'll just throw numbers for numbers. So if we needed 30 people on a midnight tour, and only 12 showed up, so we're already 18 behind. And now when the 7-3 comes
We don't
in,
do it that way at the fire department. Continue.
okay, gotcha. And other agencies also, they're able to shut down, let's say the police department, for
That makes
example,
sense.
they can shut down a sector, and then the patrol vehicle has to cover a larger area of responsibility. Correction, we can't do that. We have to house housing units in particular with I would say a minimum of 1 correction officer, and for safety and security is why we want the 2, the A, B, and C posts. So, I'm sorry. So to that end, on Tuesday, I had the facilities locked down until the wardens could deem that they had enough staff where those people, as the commissioner said, came in later in the day. They didn't call in sick, but they were trying to get to work. There was the transit shutdown. We had members of service calling in while emergency vehicles were allowed on the road. We were getting calls from all members of service saying that they were attempting to come to work, but because they were not in an emergency vehicle themselves, they weren't allowed on the road, even though they had credentials showing them as law enforcement officers. So soon after that, the ban was lifted on roadway transportation, so members of service were able to come in. So as the day progressed and the wardens of the facilities deemed that it was safe to lock the inmates out, that we had enough staff to provide basic services and emergency response if needed, that's when we commenced with the rolling lockdown.
So I read the article yesterday, and I appreciate that you can't always believe everything that you read. So I'll begin with that. But the article stated that the NYPD had 2% people calling out. The article went on to state that nothing has been done, or may not be done, concerning those who called in or those who never even showed up or called in. And so what I'm curious about is, and then you also mentioned that people called in 416, I believe you said, and then 700 called in sick.
That's correct.
How do you address that issue? Because that's not really sickness. What is the deterrent? What measures do you take to ensure that people act responsibly and take efforts to try to come? And what do you do to prepare in advance when you know that a snowstorm is coming?
Well,
We got no issues this go round. That's maybe in part getting lucky, but what do you do to ensure that doesn't happen?
We address staff personally, myself, the other upper managers in the agency. We stress the importance of coming to work to allow those who possibly could go home if they came to work, and that if the roads were safe for them to travel, that they could go home and see their families and take care of their business. We issued teletypes department-wide, reiterating that to all staff that, while you are essential personnel, we understand you have obligations outside of the Department of Correction, you are obligated as emergency personnel to respond to work and perform your function. Sick is collectively bargained, so I can't, get into, why people call in sick, unless there's proof that someone feigned illness, which we don't have at this point.
Let me just follow up. First off, I want to thank the department for letting Board of Corrections staff know the day of that there was a challenge. So that was appreciated. I'm just wondering, this whole issue of being a emergency, being a correction officer, it's an emergency, but not your vehicle not properly identified. If there's something that can be done at a citywide basis, if and when this happens again, because if a correction officer is doing everything he or she can, but their vehicle's not permitted on the roadway.
So what we did that morning when we were getting the calls, we had our emergency operations center, which was active on Rikers Island. We had our liaison, who was in direct contact with OEM. We sent that message out to them. If they could at least get that message out to the units that were out on the street that were preventing people from getting on the road, to at least let them know that, if you're an emergency responder, not necessarily an emergency vehicle,
Right.
you should be allowed.
I wonder if they could get some sort of placard. I don't know. I mean, just. Any other questions? And then, so last issue, Bobby, did you want to raise the issue of the funding for 18 to 21-year-olds?
Well, if it's possible, I mean, Commissioner and I briefly talked about it before. At our rule making process, you were concerned that we not fully commit the department to ending solitary confinement for those 21 and under until funds were available. And the city budget comes out in July, and I was going to ask you about progress on that, and particularly if you could comment on what the current the preliminary budget released yesterday, how that addresses that issue.
So there's not a lot in the current budget that does much there, and not that I believe there would be. We have not developed a plan, which we've committed to the board we'll have within 90 days, which gives us about another 2 months. So once we develop the plan, we'll put in the budget request to fund that plan. As Lynette said, we're formally getting that committee together to develop that plan. So we'd be putting the copy for the horse to have budget request prior to us having a plan.
And Commissioner, as we've mentioned publicly, the board is committed to working with the department. I know there's a number of other stakeholders I'd like to think are representatives in the media and the like. So I just think the more collectively, once there is a plan, a dollar amount attached to it, that we can all join forces would go a long ways. Great, thank you. So we will go back to the beginning of the agenda, and I would ask for approval of the minutes of the January 13th, 2000 meeting. Is there
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
As people recall that our bylaws indicated that we were to elect a vice chair at our annual meeting in January. Given that we were primarily focused on rulemaking, we decided to defer that to this meeting, and I'd like to see if there's a motion. Michael.
I'd like to nominate Derek Cephas. In his short time as a member of the board, he's shown, I think, great leadership, wisdom, understanding of some of the complicated issues, just like the ones that are being discussed today. I also think he has a political ear, and not to misspeak, as the chairman did, about the situation with regard to the police department.
Thank you very much.
I second
Jennifer.
that motion. I second that motion. In the short time that I've been on the board, and I've worked very closely with Derek, particularly on the rulemaking concerning the enhanced supervisory housing unit, I found that he brought a new perspective and a different lens to the issues, has a curiosity and a sincerity about the concerns of both the inmates on Rikers and throughout the system, as well as trying to ensure the proper balance with the corrections officers. And so I second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. So, Derek, I want to welcome you as vice chair, and I just want to reiterate, it's like I'm very pleased and excited to have someone to partner with. And one of the things, and Derek and I have shared this with the board, is that we're committed over the next, between now and the next meeting, to really look at what the governance, what the committee structure should be like, because I think people would agree that this is a very active board, and we want to make sure that we've got the right committees, both from a standing and ad hoc, and obviously to work closely with stakeholders, and particularly the two respective departments. So Derek, welcome, and stay tuned.
Thank you.
The next issue is suicide watch inmates in the Central Punitive Segregation Unit, and I want to thank Bobby Cohen for bringing this to the board's attention, that on January 29th, Bobby was at OBCC with Richard Wolf, who I introduced at the beginning of the meeting, and there were 10 inmates that were in suicide watch. That was a real issue and a concern of DOH, MH, and when Bobby sent the email out, there were still 6 inmates that were in punitive segregation. Unfortunately, this is not the first time, and I had reached out and had a number of conversations over the weekend with Commissioner Pont. There was another incident in November of 2014, and also in the last summer in June. And clearly it's inconsistent with rule number 117B2, and also our most recent rulemaking made it very clear that DOH-MH has the authority to order discharge of persons identified to be at significant risk for harm when housed in solitary confinement. When I reached out to the commissioner, he was very responsive, and within 24 hours, the inmates were released to other appropriate housing. But one of the things from the board perspective, and Commissioner, it would be helpful to hear from you and your team, is just in terms of a corrective action plan going forward. And I understand there's at times tension between the two departments, but how we can really work through this so we do not have this ongoing situation. Commissioner?
So it's my understanding as we looked into this issue that there had been inmates who had spent, I believe, days waiting for an appropriate bed placement so they could be put on suicide watch. And I believe, and Eric will fill in any blanks on this, that the inmates were on suicide precautions in punitive seg, but needed to be moved. I believe that's correct. So we had an issue on bed space, on the types of beds available for these inmates, and part of the discussion recently, and I'll have Eric get into the details of the plan, to allow us to go over whatever the number is in RHUs to get those inmates out of punitive seg to a more appropriate housing environment for the suicide precautions. So I'll have Eric fill that in.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So as the commissioner said, the goal, certainly when somebody's put on suicide watch, we initiate the watch immediately. Reminders have been put out to staff about that actually just in the very recent past, just a couple of weeks ago. So the watch is initiated and then the search for appropriate bed begins, and I think we would all agree that that's the right approach to take. Where bed space has been a challenge, we've ceased the practice of moving people into the open dormitories in OBCC because it has been considered very unsafe. We had a very terrible incident there in the fall, and we don't want a repeat of that. So that's what has led to the situation you saw. It was abated immediately, and what we've done to address this issue going forward is, as the commissioner said, we'll be using the OBCC 5 North RHU for those short-term watches. There are 50 beds in the unit and 35 people in those beds. So I've discussed this with Dr. Venters. It's not a situation that we want to occur. We certainly don't want to do to overpopulate that unit. But in the short term, to get folks out of CPSU and into a treatment environment and then assess their needs going forward, whether or not they need MO housing, hospital care, or some additional placement, or to make free a permanent RHU bed for them, we'll be putting them there while they're assessed. These typically happen over the weekend, and so by Monday morning, our hope is to have the census back to 35 each day.
So the question is, if you become aware, like within how many hours would someone be moved to the OBCC?
Our expectation is that should happen pretty much immediately at this point. It's all within the same facility. We want the watch initiated, we'll identify a bed, and then we'll relocate the person.
Bobby?
Well, I appreciate the plan going forward, although it has problems. One does have to occasionally overload a unit. Basically, is what you're talking about is you're going over your capacity, which was designed with some goal in mind. And if it's one or two, and the Department of Health says it's okay, that's fine. If it goes up further, it's not a complete solution. But we'll see on that one right now. I want to raise two other points and a question. I think, Commissioner, you described it pretty well, although it was weeks, not days, in terms of how long people were waiting in CPSU after being specifically asked. After the department was asked by DOHMH, based upon their finding and consistent with our rule that you cannot house this person in CPSU because it is dangerous. And I can understand, I went there and I spoke to Warden Stoops, who said, I know about it, there's nothing I can do about it. And I think that there should be a procedure, or I would be interested in hearing your suggestion of a procedure which knocks that situation up. I can understand that there can be an hour problem. I can understand you have to rearrange cells to get things done. But if it's not happening, and particularly in the case where you don't want it to happen, so I'm just going to. 2 weeks is a long time, and this is the third time this year, as Chairman Gordon said, where DOHMH said these people have to be moved, or cannot be moved, and the Department of Health, Department of Corrections says we're not moving it. That be bumped up at a very high level, either to Chief Murphy or above. If you're not going to do it, and DOH says you have to do it, then you have to. It can't be something that's residing at the level. Not that Warden Stoops wasn't or was doing what he could do. So if you could respond to that. I raise it particularly because at our last meeting, the president of the officers union specifically said that he objected to the Department of Health saying that this person cannot be in solitary confinement because of their medical or mental health status. And it seemed to me that you were carrying out that in practice. I believe you don't want to do that, but how are you going to make that not happen?
So we now have monitoring on this situation going on constantly. In addition to the fact that the staff in OBCC have a mechanism now by which they can both resolve the problem or escalate it. The health folks, the forensic folks, send out every 2 hours a listing of anybody that has had a watch initiated in the CPSU. That comes to me. It goes to all the wardens as well. I can vouch for the fact that it happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so if by that next report it has not been resolved, then I'm able to get involved and escalate the issue or resolve it myself in consultation with the board or the chief or whomever is appropriate. So we have vigilance on the issue now, and there should not be delays. If there are, for any reason, we have a mechanism now by which to resolve it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda are a series of updates from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene in terms of their mental health services and programming at the CAPS, or Clinical Alternatives to Punitive Segregation, the PACE unit, RHU, and TRU. Dr. Venters?
Good morning. So just to reprise where we just left off, in discussing the CPSU issue, I think that I echo the comments of Commissioner Berliner and Commissioner Pont, that really since the most recent tragic suicide, at that point we set up a a notification system that goes to everybody in leadership of both agencies about not only people who are in CPSU who need to come off for suicide watch reason, but people we want to go to the mental health center at AMKC and C71. So we're getting every 2 hours an update of all the people who fall into those two categories, and we're watching them. And I think that we are able to then impact their transfer because, as you said, this sometimes can get lost at the facility level. So we think it's incredibly important. Our view is that the CPSU or the ESHU, neither of those is an appropriate place to do suicide watch. So we're not going to open the new ESHU doing suicide watch. The cells that are there may be helpful insofar as those patients may be identified as needing to go somewhere else, and they may go somewhere else, like to an MO, to the hospital. But we take, because somebody needing to be evaluated for suicide needs a comprehensive group of things, most importantly to assess whether or not they're going to harm themselves, take their own lives, and we need to do a medically adequate job of that. Also, in the interest of everybody involved, if we don't think that there's a risk for suicide or serious self-harm, we need to do that assessment also quickly, so that if they said it and they said it was a joke and they didn't mean it, or if there's some reason that they don't need to be on a suicide watch, we should figure that out too. But those tasks are very complex, and they need to happen with mental health professionals in a setting that's not a punitive setting. And so recently, when there's a security concern about somebody or a safety concern, both departments have decided that the RHU, particularly in OVCC, is the appropriate place to do that. And I think that that's a good near-term solution.
And the other thing I might add, that even though this went on, as Dr. Cohen said, for far too long, I know there was regular conversations, Commissioner Benders with you and Commissioner Berliner. So there was back and forth dialogue on this issue.
And I think, to be fair, Chief Murphy and Commissioner Berliner had actually set up in place the resolution that came on the Friday or the Saturday. I think was certainly helped along by your all's view into the situation. But the solution that we implemented was, Chief Murphy and Commissioner Berliner had discussed with our mental health staff, and we talked about earlier in the week, and I think we all recognized that we obviously needed to solve that problem. So, thank you for the information, and I credit them with having acted both on behalf of the patients, but also based on what we discussed. So, quick update on some of the units that you mentioned. I think, as everybody knows, the PACE unit has been, we have a second PACE unit open right now, and so just to reprise, a year and a half ago we opened a unit called the CAPS unit, Clinical Alternatives to Punitive Segregation. That's for people with serious mental illness that heretofore would have gone into solitary confinement when they earned an infraction in the jail setting. That is an all-clinical setting where people are engaged in all sorts of programming and treatment throughout the day. It's a very big success. The patients who go in there have very much lower rates of harm to themselves, harm to others, do much better medication compliance. We then decided to take that model and use that not just for people who had serious mental illness who had an infraction, but for our regular MO population. So, as you also may know, there's about 20 mental observation units throughout the jail system. And so, to our view, all 20 of those should have the same commitment to staffing and programming that we have in the CAPS unit, which is strangely for people who got in trouble, who had a problem. And so we received funding from OMB to take 4 of the MO units and convert them to these PACE units, which are much the CAPS model of having treatment aides there all the time, having programming all day, having steady staff that train together, security and health. So we opened the first PACE unit about a month and a half ago in AMKC, which is a hospital return unit, which is doing very well. And then just last week we opened the second PACE unit in GRVC on 11, and we're filling that up slowly, and we have 2 more to go. So those are a great success. And certainly for everybody here who's been in the Maui, to go into a cell area that used to be the Maui and now see the PACE unit, it really is tremendous. So those units are rolling out. We have 2 more of those that we're working hard to get open in the coming months, the PACE units. The TRU and the adolescent reforms, I think, are going very well. Great credit to the Commissioner Pond, Commissioner Saunders, and everybody else. I think that we're on pace to, both get all the fine details of the TRU fleshed out in the coming weeks with a small group, including the warden and the mental health unit chief and Dr. Ford, and then also take some of the learnings from that small unit and bring it to the rest of the facility for the 16 and 17 year olds. And I would then finish with the RHU. I think we, both agencies are committed to changing our approach to the RHU, and I think that we have a small group of security staff and health staff, senior leadership of both agencies that are going to that are coming together to hammer out a new approach to the RHU. That I think that the central elements of this will be to come up with an approach that allows most people to engage in programming, because we have health staff that work on these units, but because of the complexity of the rules and who's out and who's in, it's very difficult for patients to effectively engage in the care that we're ready to give them. It has to do with the lockout schedule and things like that. So I think that in fairly short order, we'll be able to come up with an approach that both allows patients to engage more in the care we think they need in the RHUs, but also meets the security concerns that corrections has for a small group of people.
So just in terms of RHU, both publicly, Commissioner Bassett and Commissioner Pond have said this is not the model we want. So is there, I mean, it's great that the two departments, understand that and are trying to work towards a new model. Do you have a better sense of what the timing is, or maybe defer to Commissioner
Sure,
Pond?
we've had some very preliminary discussions about coming together and coming up with a new model. I think that, my hope would be that by the next BOC meeting, we've had enough internal meetings with the two agencies that we can certainly share some details with you. I think that one thing that's helpful is we have mental health staff already allocated to the RHUs. And so unlike the ESHUs or some of the other units, where coming up with a model is not the hard part. The hard part is going and getting staff to fund it. We're actually in the position of having staff that want to engage more with the patients. And so it's to us to come up with a model that lets them do that.
So what we'll do is, even if it's still a work in progress, we'll put it on the next month's agenda. Bobby?
Yeah, well, I do very much appreciate that you're reassessing this. So thank you, Michael. Commissioner Pont has repeatedly said in conversation that he thought it was an ill-formed model when it developed, and was not surprised and looked forward to developing something new. But it's important to I think the board staff were very helpful to me in figuring some of these things out. I visited the RHU and OBCC a couple of weeks ago, and with Richard Wolf. Prisoners in the RHU at OBCC were not getting out of their cells. Mental health staff in OBCC who were responsible for the RHU were not conducting groups in RHU. They were not conducting individual therapy in RHU. When they did visit, they were visiting cell side, which means for those of you who have not been to the RHU and OBCC, it means that you're talking through a solid door from the side where you can't see the person at the same time you can hear them. If you can hear them, and the mental health staff told me that they were forced to do it cell side because there were no escort officers available and there were no handcuffs available, which was the same thing that I was told a year ago when the RHU opened up in OBCC. I think that those were the statements that the mental health staff told me. I think they should be understood as metaphors for something else, which means that we're just not providing access to mental health staff. Additionally, even though the group processes weren't taking place and the individual therapy was not taking place, people were having their levels. Those of you who are not familiar, there's an RHU level system where you earn time out of cell based upon your progress. Even though there was no therapy going on, people were being moved through their levels, meaning that they would have more hours out of cell, but were not getting out of cell. And this was documented by our staff in review. So it's like Maui, and it's more than like Maui because as the board review of recent violence in specialized units on Rikers Island show, the rate of violence in the RHUs, similar to Maui, is 3-4 times that of any place else, including the CPSU. So this is I appreciate all the concern that's being expressed towards this, but it's urgent, and
I completely agree.
And handcuffs should be available, and escort officers should be available.
I think that the handcuffs, escort officers, I think that the central problem with the RHU model is that in a place that's mostly about solitary confinement, in a place that's mostly dedicated to punishment, we then try and pour in some clinical interventions, these groups, therapy, and that there is no way for some small amount of clinical therapy to contest with a setting that's built for punishment. And so that's why we need to disaggregate the two. We need to say for most people and most of the time we're committed to clinical engagement. And for people who are actively posing a security risk, there may be a different approach. But I think that the best lesson for us is not just in what the patients tell us, but in our data. And so we know, for instance, that the CAPS program has rates of self-harm and rates of injury that are much, much lower than RHU. But even if you allow for the fact that different patients might go to the two types of units, when we look at the patients that go to both, that is to say there's quite a few patients that are both in a CAPS and an RHU at some point, the patients who, while they're in CAPS, their rates of self-harm and injury are less than half what they are when they're in RHU. And so we need to learn from them and from the data of these experiences, which is, I think, that both agencies agree, and I agree with you completely, that this is a model that does not work, that we need to commit to clinical intervention when we say we're going to do it. We need to bring the resources, and then I think that when there's a security concern, we need to address that also. But we can't do, it's hard to do, and this is why we don't do suicide watch on CPSU or ESHU, is you can't have a place about security and then think that you're doing a good job clinically if it's a very complex clinical task.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, in terms of we'll now move to unless there are other issues for the agenda, we'll move to the public comment period. And our first speaker, and as everyone knows, it's for 3 minutes, is Evelyn Litwack from JAC, Jail Action Coalition.
Good morning and congratulations to your vice chairmanship.
Thank you.
I have spoken before, so by way of background, I'll just say I was released from federal prison in August, and I spent the better part of the last 2 months that I was in federal prison in solitary confinement. And my comments go to a specific situation regarding me and commitments that you made regarding the ESHU unit. In meeting with various board members, it was clear to me, and I believe other members of JAC, that you were all committed to creating metrics that would define lots of different issues. Of particular concern to me is the physical and the mental health well-being of anybody who's placed in solitary. And in order to know that, I believe you have to, prior to anybody entering solitary, you have to have a baseline measurement of what kind of physical condition are they in, and do a checkup. What kind of mental condition are they in, and provide some kind of test. And the reason I say this is that without knowing the baseline and doing some measurement while they're in solitary, you don't know, and you don't know other than word of mouth or opinion, anything regarding the impact of solitary on their mental health or on their physical condition. While I was in solitary, I suffered from 24-hour vertigo and 24-hour migraines, two conditions I never had in my life prior to being in solitary confinement. And I had them every day. If you check the weekly reports that I received in solitary, you would see that I was theoretically seen every day because a medical officer did walk through, but did not speak to me. You would also see that a psychologist walked through, but I did not speak to them. Now, since my return to the free world, I have suffered from those migraines. I have suffered from vertigo, and I was hospitalized for a week just now because I have 24-hour vertigo, 24-hour migraines. Two conditions I never had. Had someone taken any kind of measurement, they may have made a correlation between me being in solitary and the impact of the fluorescent lights, the temperature levels that were in the room, and a whole host of things that I didn't experience in prison, but I did experience in solitary. Conditions that might have caused this, which right now feels like a permanent condition and right now has impacted me. I also have psychological conditions. I don't sleep. Now, I always had a little bit of a problem, but never like this.
30 seconds.
The quality of my life has changed, so I'm only going to ask that you consider, before you put someone in, or close to when you put someone in, get a measurement, not just a blood pressure check, but get a serious medical measurement, get a serious psychological interview so that you know if this is debilitating for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Litwak. The next speaker is Jared Chasso.
Good morning. My name is Jared Chasso. I'm here on behalf of Brooklyn Defender Services. BDS represents 45,000 New Yorkers every year, including 5,000 who pass through New York City jails. I thank the New York City Board of Corrections for the opportunity to speak today. Before I begin, I must note that BDS shares the concerns of the other advocate who just spoke today on enhanced supervision housing and solitary confinement in general. I will focus my comments on one issue in particular. While BDS acknowledges the board's recent efforts to restrict the use of punitive segregation, we are deeply concerned about the hundreds of people at Rikers Island who comprise the backlog for the box. Specifically, we assume that many individuals have long sentences of more than 30 days, the maximum consecutive sentence under the new rules, and we are concerned that DOC will impose these sentences in full despite the new rules. We urge the board and the department to work together to review these old cases and, if necessary, address the incongruity of lengthy sentences in the context of the new rules through additional rulemaking. Frankly, it is absurd to impose solitary sentences on individuals after months of peaceful coexistence with the general population, especially in spread out increments of 30 days. Preserving lengthy sentences could force people to serve big time in 30-day increments over the course of a year or more. If the department were to truly ascertain immediate security risks, we are confident that delayed punishment would never be indicated. Eliminating and reducing unnecessary big sentences to meet the new minimum standard, or to going further, the United Nations Committee Against Torture standard of 15 days or fewer would better serve the interests of justice and help clear the backlog. To be sure, the new rules represent a step in the right direction toward ending the shameful use of extreme isolation in our city jails, but in the interest of fairness and common sense, this progress should be felt by all. Thank you for your consideration of my comments. And I just wanted to add one quick thing, if I have a moment. Given Dr. Venter's statement regarding the difficulty, if not the impossibility, delivering care in the RHU, I think it begs the question of why this unit is the first place that people will go when they need suicide precautions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Deidre Shore, Jail Action Coalition.
Hi, I'm reading a very short statement on behalf of a gentleman who was in prison during his adolescence and adulthood for lengthy periods of time and spent a lot of it within solitary confinement. My name is Dakim. I am a child prisoner for life. I do not believe that prison guards are capable of rehabilitation, and 40 hours of training surely isn't sufficient. I propose an increase in educators, clinicians, therapists, and other therapeutic workers within jails and prisons. I ask for oversight of the DOC with a community review board, and I demand an end to the ESHU, as it is just a continuation of torture from solitary confinement to specialized control units. We ask that you implement the resolutions offered by Jack Cake, Resist Rikers, and the Stop Mass Incarceration Network. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Shore. So that concludes our public comment period. The next board meeting will be on Tuesday, March 10th, consistent with our moves from 6 board meetings a year to 9 board meetings a year. And I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? The meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.